Hey guys, welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. My name's McCarthy, and I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we are going to go over the biggest winners from the 2024 NFL Draft. These are all guys or teams or position groups that we thought really improved and also got opportunities that if they went to a different team, they wouldn't have gotten. So
yeah, it's essentially teams that impressed us based on the moves they made or the guys that they selected at the value which they did. But again, it's teams that improved or made moves that did the best to maximize what people didn't think would happen. So
right, absolutely.
we'll get right into it. Minnesota Vikings and JJ McCarthy. Everybody in the worst kept secret thought Minnesota was trading up to take a quarterback in this draft. But everybody had them going to the Cardinals at 4 or the Chargers at 5, or some even had New England at 3.
Yeah.
Regardless, multiple first-round picks, if not 3 of them, were expected to be taken or given away to take one of their guys.
Yeah.
And they even tried to get 2-3 for Drake May with New England, and New England just wanted to stay pat. But they offered 3 first-round picks. Well, they didn't even have to give up their second one to move up one spot to get JJ McCarthy, which, again, slight reach in our eyes in the whole big board grand scheme of things. But getting him at 10, not giving up that extra first, and having the ability to have the coach, the skill players, and then a veteran quarterback at the very moment that he doesn't have to start right away. It was a great situation for him, and we've been pounding the table that whoever goes to Minnesota has a really, really solid chance to succeed. And he was probably the least right now ready to play of any of them, but that's okay.
Yeah, he can definitely sit in this situation. I mean, he doesn't have the keys yet. That's kind of the thing. And so basically he has to wait, 1 year. Sam Darnold on his 1 year, I believe $10 million contract. And so he'll wait 1 year. And then if he does well as a backup and he'll go in games and he'll play a little bit, but you don't want him to play as like a guy with pressure on his shoulders. I want to see that, of course. We keep talking about that, is JJ hasn't had pressure where he's got to be the guy to win the game, but we'll see a little bit of it. We'll see him get in there. Minnesota wasn't bad last year, but they didn't have a quarterback at the end of the year, and they were just trying to figure it out. And that's why you look at the screen and their points per game is 21st rather than where it could have been if Kirk Cousins was still playing.
And the thing with, if you check out our losers video, we'll be bringing up the New England Patriots and how they just are not the situation ready for a quarterback to contribute right away. Minnesota, they are going to be patient. And really, unless there's an injury to Sam Darnold, hopefully that there's not. We don't ever wish injuries on anybody, but if there is, don't expect him to be rookie of the year. But if he can have a Dak Prescott like 200 yards a game, just don't turn the ball over like he did at Michigan, that's going to be more than enough for me to take away that he can be all right in this league.
Yeah, I just need a game manager for the first year if he comes in, basically. And they added to their defense. Can't forget that. They don't have any 2025 picks now because of the moves that they made in this draft.
Yeah, essentially, their second round pick they had at 23. They moved up to 17, traded with Jacksonville for Dallas Turner, who at the time was the number 2 edge off the board, but everybody else's number 1 edge. Getting him at 17 was solid value. However, they did spend a lot to get up there. And then also to get that 23rd pick last month, they gave up a second round for Houston next year. So they don't have a second, third, fourth, or fifth round pick next year. But they got the first. So they're probably going to be a team that we're going to be like, all right, they're moving back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they'll probably be in the 10 to 15 range, maybe. We'll kind of see what happens. We view them right now as 4th best in their division, but in the toughest division, or one of them. And so they're probably going to be a 6 to 8 win team and be right in the middle. And they're probably going to be like, okay, well, we're going to move back to 25 for somebody to move up for somebody, and we'll get that extra middle round picks, and then that's how we'll build out our roster.
Yeah, they're going to have to get some picks, but they moved up twice or 3 times, I guess, in this draft because they moved up to 23 with Houston and then back up again to 17 and from 11 to 10 with the Jets. But lots of opportunity with this team. So that's the cool thing. And if you're a Minnesota fan, don't expect next year to be your year. But, if you hit on JJ McCarthy, like you're going to be very happy because
your probably ceiling is third best in the division. Whether that be Chicago or Green Bay, underwhelming. But at the same time, I'd rather be in Minnesota's situation than somewhere like Dallas, who,
right.
really can't spend or do anything. And they could potentially lose their franchise quarterback for nothing next offseason. And if that happens, or then they got to spend $60 million on him. Either way, that's not a situation that I love. I'd much rather be in Minnesota's situation.
Right.
So moving on, Xavier Worthy going to Kansas City. Again, he wasn't our, what was he, 5th off the board?
Yeah,
wide
he
receiver?
was our 10th.
Or 4th off the board.
Basically, he was
5th.
5th
Sorry,
after
I
Brian
apologize.
Thomas.
So, yeah, he was not our 5th best receiver, but again, for his talent, that was the best situation he could have done is land in Kansas City. One that they've just been praying for, a scat receiver that can take the defense over the top since losing Tyreek Hill and Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Mecole Hardman, others, MVS, as a different style of receiver. None of them have taken the ball and bull by the horns with their opportunities. They go out and get a 1-year rental on Marquise Brown, which is an improved version or idea of what they got in Juju Smith-Schuster when they signed him to a 1-year deal. Rashee Rice, don't know the situation officially, but you expect that he'll miss some time in 2023. And then Xavier Worthy now, and also can't forget Travis Kelce. So very formidable receiving group, and he's somebody that will probably be very high in on best ball type of drafts.
Yeah, I will say there's a reason it doesn't say Xavier Worthy and the Kansas City Chiefs because of that fact that, we don't have him as high as some of the other players that fell. But at the same time, it's the best situation. It's the situation that, we had been talking about for a long time. And you really wanted to put him in our mock draft to Kansas City because you thought, even if we don't necessarily like it, he's needs to be a Kansas City Chief to maximize. And you were right. And, you get a All-American return specialist. So that's an improvement there. And you get the 4.21 that we kind of expected. That was one thing, we thought he was fast when he played, and he was fast, but he needed to produce more. Being the 341st wide receiver on the out of PFF's, 1,023 isn't very good, but at the same time, you get the speed, you get the Patrick Mahomes arm, and it's the best opportunity for him to be really good if he is going to be really good.
Right.
So, yeah, he fits here for sure. So, but jumping over, why not the biggest winner? Number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. Sorry, I apologize.
No, you're straight.
But no, not only did they sign Keenan Allen, they also drafted a wide receiver at 9. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's just the best situation other than Minnesota, who was never going to get to one to begin with,
right?
That he could have asked for. Obviously, you go to Chicago, who's never truly had a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame level in the modern era of football quarterback, which very few teams haven't at least had a good one. And there was a stigma of, he should force his way out of Chicago. Well, this isn't a tire fire that they just don't know what they're doing. They just have never gotten quarterback right. This isn't the Jets with a Zach Wilson or Sam Darnold situation where no receivers. Look at Drake May. No receivers, below average line. It's just not, you don't know if the coach that is now there is the future coach, which Chicago, you don't really know either, but you have an offensive mind at least. And like you said, you got the skill players, and they heavily invested. DeAndre Swift, like you said, Keenan Allen trading for 9th overall pick. We had them moving back to gain some extra picks because they only had 4 in the draft, and they were like, no, we only need 4. And one of them is going to be a punter.
Why
So,
not?
and then they re-signed the guys that they needed to, Jalen Johnson, to a very, very reasonable deal.
Yeah.
Montez Sweat is now going to be a full-time Chicago Bear with a full offseason. So, very good team. And then goes into a situation where they were a 7-win team last year with the number 1 pick. We've seen worst to first happen all the time for 3-14 teams. Look at Houston last year doing that. Well, Chicago, one of the easiest schedules in football, fourth
Yeah.
place schedule, and they are going to be a 10-win team. Easiest bet to have a winning record to me. And Caleb Williams, I don't know if he'll instantly come in and do what Patrick Mahomes did his first year, which
Right.
I know he's had a year, but his first true season MVP and AFC Championship. I'm not predicting that, but I'm predicting him coming in and setting the franchise record in passing yards and probably passing touchdowns
Mm-hmm.
and being a top 5 team in terms of seeding. Maybe 6, depending on, because I don't expect Chicago to win the division out the
Right.
gate. But yeah, it's a very exciting situation for him. Just take away the recent years of just struggling primarily because they didn't have quarterback figured out. It's a great situation to walk into when you have guys that can make plays.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say about Chicago is if you look there, they were 7-10 last year. And that's something we harp on is like they weren't the worst team in football just because they had the number 1 overall pick. They traded for that pick. The 9th overall pick was their pick. And one thing that, you look at this team and you look at last year, they basically just added 3 skill players, I guess, and got a little bit better on offense in that way. Last year, they had Tyson Bagent throwing the ball for 3 or 4 games while Justin Fields was out. They still won 7 games.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields, we can talk about that later, whatever. He went for a conditional 5th round pick or 4th round pick. I can't remember. 5th round pick. Exactly. So that tells you the ability that the NFL thinks of him. Now you're getting the number 1 overall pick improvement. Price is everything.
People who say is the best prospect since Luck.
Yeah.
Which, who knows if that's true, but the fact is, like, that's how
Comparison-wise.
he's worthy of being in the discussion for that title. So, which is saying something because there's been so many good quarterbacks coming out in recent years.
Trevor Lawrence, I would
which people have, him over Trevor.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, he's got the opportunity to be the right out of the gate rookie of the year, number 1 on that for sure, just because of his situation. So, all right, one of our favorite drafts is the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. They get a plethora of really good football players, even value at the end of the draft, not even just doing what we thought they should do at the beginning of the draft, but also then finding value even later. So
yeah, some people felt indifferent about the Joe Alt pick.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that had Malik Neighbors going to the Chargers doesn't understand Jim Harbaugh or how the draft works.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was never the plan. Marvin Harrison Jr. was so good that he was an exception to plan A if he were to be on the board. But if he wasn't, this was always going to be offensive lineman early.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that is he loves to play in the trenches. And he just, so many comments in the pre-draft process at the combine. We need to build, meat and potatoes up front. And they had their left tackle already in place in Rashawn Slater. But essentially everywhere else, because Corey Linsley, career-threatening injury. Brian Bulaga, obviously no longer with the team and has aged out. They really, other than left tackle, didn't have truly anything there. And so they went and took the best offensive lineman on our board at 5, and it was not a reach.
No.
And the only thing is just he only played left tackle, and Rashawn Slater is the left tackle. So who's playing right? Doesn't matter. You got bookends at tackle.
Oh, yeah.
And any edges, you're never going to have a Joe Burrow situation now where, coming into the league 60 sacks, et cetera, and so on. 1, that's not the style of play that they're looking to do. But 2, Justin Herbert, the last 2 years, he had internal organ injuries 2 years ago, and then broke a thumb on a pass rush, somebody's helmet, breaking his thumb or his middle finger. That's why he missed so much time last year. You're not going to have that anymore. And so I don't know if I can put them as a playoff team yet, but they're on a great trajectory. Especially we'll go into the rest of their draft, but yeah, their first round pick was just A1.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it couldn't have been any other player other than Marvin Harrison, who was not on the board.
Yeah, and so next up, you get Lad McConkey, who is one of our favorite players throughout this process, and I have a Chargers fan that's my brother-in-law is a Chargers fan, and he wasn't excited about this pick, and I was like, you're crazy, because you got to look at what he was able to do. Of course, not necessarily on the field because he was so injured this last year, but goes to the Senior Bowl, kills it. Yeah, absolute difference maker as a route runner. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. They have, Josh Palmer. They have Quentin Johnston that'll probably man the outside more so. He can play in the slot, though. That allows him to, be a safety net for Justin Herbert.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, then he runs a 4.38 at the combine. And we know, he's also very fast. So we didn't just have to worry about, him not being able to, get away from people and stuff like that. He creates separation in multiple ways. So
we don't view Lad as a guy that's going to eventually, multi-100 catch season, 1,500 yards, but you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Julian Edelman might make the Hall of Fame without making a Pro Bowl.
Yeah, for being a number 2 receiver.
That is the type, which obviously Julian Edelman was a 7th round receiver that was previously a quarterback. So if your second round, if you logically, my second round pick has the ceiling of a 7th rounder. No, it's just that is the style of player that he can make the most out of his career.
Right.
And Wes Welker-ish. And he's just very talented player that just hasn't put up the numbers because of the offense that he was in. And he's going to an offense that is not going to prioritize receivers. So he's probably not going to be, like I said, the 100 catch, 1,500 yard receiver, 10, 12 touchdowns. But he's going to move the chains on 3rd and 6.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to be so important. And you're always going to hear his name being called in the future. And that's why it made us so excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Raiders fan. We had 3rd and Renfro for the longest time. We're going, 3rd and Renfro. We're throwing it to him because he always was, able to fall forward and get us a first down. So Lad's an exciting player just because, he makes this offense better in a different way than expected. And he's actually a good blocker for his size, which is something that goes overlooked, especially when you are in a run heavy offense. But jumping to 3, this is probably, our favorite dark horse to win Defense Player of the Year, because Junior Colson he was a Michigan Wolverine, goes to the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, and it's the perfect fit because they need someone that can tackle and go and get 120 plus tackles a year. And he's that guy, and he can do it right now. He's got one of the most pro-ready linebacker bodies in this draft class, and I'm very excited about this pick. He's not going to be asked to do a lot in coverage because they have so many good DBs, and he's just one of the most exciting players on this list for sure.
Yeah, I mean, everybody had the one Michigan player being Blake Corum, which, I guess that probably could have been the Xavier Worthy-esque, like that's where you can maximize your talent.
Right.
But it still would have been a weird compliment to Gus Edwards and then J.K. Dobbins. But regardless, Junior Colson being the middleman of their defense, which Jim Harbaugh, number 1 defense last year, and that is what led them to being a national champion. You get the guy that was one of the tackling leaders on the team, and they've struggled filling the middle over the last few years. They invested a 1st round pick in Kenneth Murray, way back when, Manti Te'o, and then last year Eric Kendricks tried to bring in as a veteran. Just underwhelming production from the linebacker position. So they've been longing for that, and so that's going to be a huge help if he can fill that hole, like we said. And you've already got the camaraderie, you've got the coaching. The DC is coming from Michigan, also.
Right. It's your defense.
Yeah,
like you come in and it is your defense right now. No, I love the pick. And then going down, Justin Mboigbe was solid player for Alabama. He's a really good, he's not necessarily like the run stopper, but he can get after the passer. Cam Hart great value at this point in the draft. And then my favorite pick in this bottom part is, well, that's going to do disservice, but Brendan Rice was really good also. He's at the 7th round, he's probably a 5th rounder. That's a huge value.
Everybody, if you talk about like biggest value picks, he's going to make every list of every expert because everybody loved the Brendan Rice pick.
Yeah.
We don't know if he's going to be, he wasn't even the best receiver that needed a team with receiving for USC.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a great value pick. So everybody loves the pick. We don't know if it'll pan out. Obviously, 7th rounder, it's a long shot to begin with. But yeah, like you can't fault them for taking a great value pick.
Kamani Vidal, though, is my favorite pick after, the Junior Colson pick. That dude, he had 1,600 plus yards last year rushing. He played at Troy. And so going to Texas State, having a little bit of tie, we've seen a little bit of him throughout that time. And that dude is really good at football. 5'8", 215, hard runner, basically fits. If you're going to take a Blake Corum in the 2nd and 3rd round, well, why not just get Kamani Vidal in the 6th round and call it a day? Because they're very similar styles. He's not going to wow you, obviously, but he ran a 4.40. He was faster than these guys that are above him at the running back position. And he's going to probably get touches in this offense, and he'll probably be one of the more productive young running backs from this class because of the fact that the style of offense, the style of running, and his fit in this offense makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So jumping over, biggest winner by, full team and not a player in this draft class was Bryce Young. He gets a player at every position, every level of football right here. He gets a wide receiver, a running back, and a tight end, and hopefully that helps mold him into something.
I mean, the jury is still out if Bryce Young can contribute, but there was a reason that he was in the conversation. Whether or not you wanted him over C.J. Stroud, doesn't matter. He was in the conversation for number 1 pick, deservingly so. He's a very mature guy. The only knock on him is his size.
Mm-hmm.
Just he's very slender and then also under 6 foot. Well, this is why situation matters. They moved heaven and earth to get him from 9 to 1, traded your multi-1,000-yard receiver, and then all you really brought in last offseason was Miles Sanders, who we've never really been high on as a running back to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And then he struggled. He statistically had the worst rookie season of any quarterback in the last 25 years.
Right.
Which is saying something because there's been some bad ones. That doesn't mean that is what he should be. He should just be stuck in the purgatory of the bottom and he won't ever pan out. Well, they didn't have a 1st-round pick. And obviously they lost the trade in the grand scheme of things based on getting the number 1 pick in the draft and not being able to use it.
Right.
Is always tough. But they made the most of not having a 1st. And they traded into the 1st, actually, 1 spot to get Xavier Leggett, getting a 5th-year option on him. And then number 1 running back off the board, and Jonathan Brooks later in the 2nd round. And then Jatavion Sanders, who fell out of favor with us being the 2nd best tight end in the class. Well, he fell into a really good situation.
Yeah.
So every single level in terms of skill players, which they had one of the worst groups in the NFL, they are attempting to address it.
Yeah.
And then Jonathan Mingo was a 2nd-round pick last year. You have Deontay Johnson, who you swapped with Dante Jackson, who's been, flirting with 100 catches the last couple of years with bad quarterback play. So it's definitely better. And so they're making the effort. And then on top of that, 2 big contracts to the guard spot.
Yeah.
And then Ike Ekwonu as their tackle last year.
Yeah,
so
young.
They're trying.
Yeah.
Whether or not they pan out remains to be seen. It's not like they're the Giants in terms of just struggling to fill with 1st and early round picks in the offense. They don't have that track record of bad selections. However, again, remains to be seen. Nobody's going to expect much from Carolina, but they made the effort, and Bryce Young should be very happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, giving him the opportunity to be better than last year. I mean, I believe Hayden Hurst was their best tight end.
Adam Thielen
Adam
had his
Thielen
godlike stretch, but
well, yeah, he's the only guy that can throw the ball to, basically. Jonathan Mingo, like you said, not that high on. And then I don't even remember who was out there at the other receivers.
Terrace Marshall was there for a little bit.
So it's like they didn't really have
Chark.
anybody, and they didn't have a running game. And now they're hopefully going to be better based on the fact that they just tried to reload.
Right.
And so it gives them an opportunity to at least
Yeah, we still expect them to be towards the bottom of the NFC. However, I expect progression. I don't know what their win total will officially be. I think right now it's 4.5, which is tied with New England for the worst. But, it's always smart to bet overs on the worst overall win totals. And I feel safer about Carolina over New England because the entire NFC South was in the top 5 of strength of schedule. So they're going to have the opportunity to be a 6-win team out of nowhere. And you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, they're playing the NFC. I mean, it's the worst division in football. Like they have an opportunity to go win randomly against any of those teams because
the last 2 years, division winner was 8-9, and then last year 9-8.
Yeah,
and then the year that it was 8-9, the other 3 teams finished 7-10.
Yep.
So it's we think Atlanta is separated in terms of their overall roster just because they've just killed it in the draft over the last few years, despite this year. Tampa Bay obviously outperformed expectations at the very least, and now that there is expectations, we'll see what happens with them. New Orleans is on the way down, while it's Carolina, you're on the way up. So kudos to you.
Absolutely. Well, this is one of those drafts where you don't expect 14 offensive players first, and then sometimes just players just fall in your lap, and you don't have to go anywhere to do it. They just go ahead and fall to you, and you just take them, and you don't even look back. The Eagles secondary got so much better on draft night, or the first 2 days of draft. Quinton Mitchell, I mean, what can I say? Like, dude just is a stud, and we had him. Everybody had him in the top 15, and somehow he falls to 22, and you just pounce. If you're the Eagles, who had one of the worst secondaries in football last year, even knowing the name value wasn't the worst. We know that James Bradbury's gone, so immediate impact. And then if you go look at the other side, Cooper DeJean, he went probably 20 picks too low. He's our number 17 player, and he goes 41st off the board. So we know that we get 2 new players in the secondary, a nickel, and probably 1 corner outside.
So to correct you, James Bradbury is still there.
Right. I think he's a post-June 1st cut.
Yeah, he's post-June 1st. That will.
Yeah, he won't be there.
We don't expect him to. Him and Darius Slay, I expect one of them at least to be gone.
Yeah.
But still, they were talented corners that just kind of were banged up, and also that's all they had. They had no depth.
Yeah.
So once they just started getting picked apart, it just was a avalanche from there. And now you just have so much depth.
Yeah.
At corner.
It's crazy.
And so when your 5th best corner is Avonte Maddox, like that's something to say because he's a very solid corner.
He's getting paid too much currently, so they might even decide to move on from him. I think he's getting like $10 million a year, $8 million a year, which is kind of too much for this position, especially when you have 2 really good young, athletic corners.
Oh yeah, and again, they were 2 of our top 4 best defensive backs, top 3, and Quinton Mitchell obviously was number 1, and we had Philly on draft night trading up to get, at the time was corner 2 because we had Quinton Mitchell going earlier than that. And I think it was a surprise to many that he fell all the way to 22. So not only getting 2 of the best 3 DBs on our board, but not even have to move really to make those work is just a home run. And with Howie Roseman, who he's been aggressive essentially every year trading up, he didn't even have to do that this year. And at least from the draft community is continuing to just hit on value picks. And so whether or not, all of them pan out like they will, like Jordan Davis was a top 10 pick that fell to them.
Right.
And, last year, Jalen Carter, which was in the conversation for number 1 non-quarterback off the board and then falling to 9, which they moved up to get.
Nakobe Dean in the third round.
Nakobe Dean,
yeah.
it just goes on. And so not all of them have panned out. Andre Dillard, but they just know how to hit value in the draft.
Well, Jeremiah Trotter is one of our favorite
Mhm.
drop guys that fell to them in the 5th round. So, yeah, they've done really well, and they know how to, like you said, hit value. But
Mhm.
I don't know why other teams aren't just
So
taking the
similar,
value.
similar in a. I think Detroit. I don't know if you feel the same way about. They're my best roster in the NFC now, based on what they've done. They had no holes except for corner, and then they traded for 2 veteran
No, I
corners,
love
and
that
then
team.
their first 2 picks were corners.
Yeah.
So they have no holes.
Yeah.
Philly or San Fran also has a really solid roster, but they have some holes. But
Right.
they're just so talented at the top that it overcomes that.
Yeah.
They don't have an overall great secondary, but they've got All Pro there, Pro Bowler there, and so it just like, all right, it's solid.
Right.
They had a bunch of retread edges but it's next to Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
So, but with Philly, they lost Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey. Fletcher Cox kind of was no longer what he once was. Jason Kelsey was still the best center in football. And while he is a future Hall of Famer and, they will miss him and his leadership, it is also, you have to acknowledge, the least important position on the offensive line.
Mhm.
And so, replacing him isn't as difficult as it seems to be when the rest of the line is so good. And then, getting Saquon Barkley, it was a luxury pick, but it's an upgrade over, Miles Sanders and then last year DeAndre Swift.
Mhm.
So I don't expect him to be a 2,000-yard threat, like some may, but he doesn't have to be.
Right.
On paper, it's just everything except for corner was really the true need, and they just hit it out of the park.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's talk about another secondary. You just mentioned Detroit. One thing that I keep mentioning is that there were 3 teams in this draft that got our top 6 of our top 7 corners in the whole draft. That was Philly, and then the Lions got 2, and then Baltimore got 2. So the Lions are next, and they move up to get Terran Arnold, jump up 5 spots, I believe, to Dallas, and then they get Ennis Rakestraw at the end of the 2nd round. Well, this just is them, you talked about they don't have any holes. Well, this is why right here. They just fixed all the issues they had. Terran Arnold feels very Detroit, when he gets me excited in a, baby blue jersey like that. That's exciting. And then Ennis Rakestraw is going to be a really good nickel safety inside corner. And then if they have to, he can also play outside corner. He's got the length and things like that. Played a lot of nickel though at Missouri. So yeah, this is a really cool duo, and they love the scrappy, just go after it guys, and that's what these two are. I love watching Ennis Rakestraw go and play the run. He wants to hit you, and he's little, and he's still coming at you. So this is a cool group.
The biggest thing is, like with Philly, they really struggled against the pass last year, but it wasn't Detroit bad. Detroit, 2 of the last 3 weeks of the season, Nick Mullins combined for close to 900 yards. Nick Mullins. You can't win Super Bowls if that's the case.
Right.
They were in the 4th quarter, were up against San Francisco on the road to get to their first Super Bowl in franchise history. So they were that close in spite of that play. And obviously it was a tad better in the playoffs. But you can't just bank on, oh yeah, well, we just had a bad stretch. We're just gonna, like I said, they added 4 legitimate contributors to the cornerback position in this free agency, and then now in the draft. Terran Arnold, we expected to go in the top 20, and obviously they traded up for him, but 24 is excellent value. And then Ennis Rakestraw, in some parts of the offseason, was into 1st round consideration.
Right.
And at the very least, early day 2, we expected him to go in the 40s somewhere, and he falls all the way to what, 61?
62?
Or,
yeah, way down there.
Yeah, tremendous value. Like you said, 6 of the top 7 corners going to 3 teams, and Detroit was one of them. Obviously, we probably favored the duo of Cooper DeJean and Quinton Mitchell more. but it's a close second.
Well, I mean, if you're just gonna let Ennis Rakestraw fall to you, I mean, that's not a problem. My thing is, we just watched two defenses that had issues in their secondary that are really good football teams, ranked in the top 5 big board or power rankings on everybody's power rankings, get two players to solidify their defense.
Yeah.
And then Baltimore, who's also ranked in the top 6, 7, 8, they also got two really good corners to add to their defense that already has Marlon Humphreys and Kyle Hamilton and those guys. So it's just, what are we doing, NFL?
Yeah. So if you look at the power of the NFC, a lot of people, the top 4, almost consensus. Dallas won't be in our top 4 when we do our power rankings and whatnot. But a lot of people view San Francisco, Philly, Detroit, and Dallas as the cutaway best in the NFC. Green Bay as a close 5th with Dallas. Again, they're probably going to be behind Green Bay, but regardless, my point is 4 teams were close to going all the way. Obviously, San Francisco was trailing to 2 teams in the 4th quarter in the NFC in Green Bay and Detroit, made it to the Super Bowl, and then that very team was in the driver's seat to win the game in the big game, and it fell apart once again. But they were close. That's how close they are. Detroit had them on the ropes. Green Bay had them on the ropes. Dallas, 3 straight 12-win seasons. Philly was the 2022 representative in the Super Bowl for the NFC. They're all close. The difference is Detroit and Philly recognized we are bad in one area, and we are going to do our best to fix that this year. And Dallas, really, you lost 6 starters. They didn't have, a true hole until they started losing players in free agency, but they didn't address many of those needs in their draft. Like you look at Tyler Guyton, never played left tackle in his life. Well, you lost your all-pro left tackle. So, okay, I guess you're trying there. Marshawn Nealon was not one of their biggest needs.
No.
And, it wasn't a reach per se, but it still didn't solve something. And then you can go on and on from there. San Francisco needs that interior line, right tackle, some DB issues, and your first round pick, you're picking Ricky Pearsall. It's like you're not solving needs, but these 2 teams are. And so it really makes you think some type of way when we're trying to outlook and make way too early predictions for the NFC and how it'll shape out. Detroit and Philly are in a good spot to run away with it. And whether or not we'll have them 1-2, they're going to be up there close, and we would not be surprised at all if that was the NFC Championship again next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And so jumping over, we're going to do the Denver Broncos. We get Bo Nix and Troy Franklin, teammates at Oregon, and it's the perfect, grouping, especially when Troy Franklin falls to the 4th round, the 102nd pick. Bo Nix gets one of his guys, and we expect Bo Nix to play early. So if he's not one of those rookie quarterbacks that we don't expect to play, he's 24. He's Sean Payton-esque type of guy, and they have no one else in their quarterback room that I think is better. You could make a case that you could reincarnate Zach Wilson. You could make a case that Jarrett Stidham needs to play because he's been there, but Bo Nix is the guy. So
yeah, Bo Nix obviously is a reach based on our draft board, but again, it's situational.
Yeah,
he goes to an offense that can maximize his strengths. So whether or not they reach for him, I don't view if Bo Nix, hypothetically, let's say New England passed on a quarterback, right? And they went Marvin Harrison. And then the second round, they were like, all right, we're going to go Bo Nix. I don't view that as a better situation, believe it or not, than Denver.
Yeah.
And it's primarily because New England doesn't have their offensive situation figured out. One is the skill group. Obviously, it would be better in that scenario with Marvin Harrison, but in totality, it would still be bottom 10. And then you don't know. It's a first-time coach that's not an offensive coach. And they didn't really hire anybody that's just like, oh, yeah, he's the future. He'll be Josh McDaniels for 10 years like Tom Brady had, et cetera, and so on. Whereas Sean Payton, Denver is tied to him. They not only did they sign him to a big contract, they traded draft capital for him. You don't see that for head coaches very often. And he was that talented of a coach that warranted that.
Mm-hmm.
And going to Bo Nix, don't expect Denver to be a playoff team this year. Don't have to be. And then with Troy Franklin again, he was in the next tier after the first round caliber receivers of guys that we actually had considered putting him at 32 to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
That was
First mock we did.
Yeah, first mock we had
him there.
Yeah. So, and he didn't really do anything, or I mean, he had a okay combine, whereas others stood out. So that's probably why he fell. But he was a very productive receiver with Oregon, and then he goes to a situation where they've had some underwhelming, I guess, production at the position.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Jerry Jeudy was a former top 15 pick that just, one, couldn't stay healthy, but two, just didn't have the want to, especially when you look at CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson picked after him.
Mm-hmm.
And they're two of the top 3 receivers in football right now, and you haven't even come close to that. That was a problem. Courtland Sutton, since being a Pro Bowler, he just has not looked like anything other than just a serviceable 2.
Right.
And then they've tried with other second-round picks, third-round picks that haven't worked.
Haven't panned out.
And so there's opportunity for targets. And Troy Franklin walks in. I'm not saying that he's going to be a 1,000-yard threat this early, but he's playing with a guy who was able to get him 1,414 touchdowns. So
yeah, I think he's a solid dynasty type of player in fantasy. One thing I will say, like, Troy Franklin actually outperformed Brian Thomas, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, all those guys. If you look at stats and what he did last year and his grade by PFF, he's better than all of them.
Mm-hmm.
He has one bad combine, doesn't run in a 4.3s like all these other guys did, and he looks a little off. Well, he's a good football player, though. Sometimes, you need to stop overthinking it and be like, well, look what he did on film. Like, he was able to, do some pretty cool things on film. 81 receptions for 1,383 yards, like 14 touchdowns. Like, 14 touchdowns is tied for second in the whole country this year. 1,383 yards is more than all those guys we just talked about, so don't overlook him. He's 21 and a half. He's still very young. And yeah, he's 176 pounds, but the frame can be added to as he ages.
Yeah. And then back to Bo Nix real quick. Obviously, he's a most starts in college football history.
Right.
And people are like, oh yeah, that's a reach. Like, he's not going to pan out. Well, if the reach and not pan out bust that you think can set the NCAA record in completion percentage and have a 45 to 3 touchdown interception ratio. Okay. Like, if you think that's a bust, like, what does he have to do to show, like, oh yeah, like, he's never going to be a top 5 quarterback to me, but that doesn't mean that he will be a bust.
He reminds me of, and I think I said this before on our thing, but he's Baker Mayfield.
Mm-hmm.
He's hated all the time for no reason. Baker won a Heisman. Bo Nix in another season, if Jaden Daniels isn't there, wins the Heisman. Baker, gets moved around on teams and stuff, but you got to look at this year, right? Look at what he did last year. He earned 3 years for $100 million is what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And Bo Nix could easily be that guy. And he's older, so he's more pro ready and things like that. So he's not going to have as much of a learning curve. He's played in multiple offenses. Why is that a bad thing? It's not. You get the opportunity to play in all those offenses. You see different reads. You see different things. Now he goes to Sean Payton, who's the perfect fit, doesn't need to throw the ball down the field, is going to get his guys open in different ways. And I just think it's a match made in heaven, and we shouldn't count him out for no, like, just because he's Bo Nix.
Right. So. And then we'll move on. This winner is essentially the move in totality of itself. Jacksonville, round 1, trading back and still landing Brian Thomas Jr. On top of the talent that Brian Thomas Jr. is, obviously NCAA touchdown leader last year. He's kind of overshadowed by Malik Neighbors since he was a top 6 pick. Very, very talented football player. In Jacksonville, we had all 3 mocks going corner. Well, they moved back, got a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rounder for just moving back 6 spots, and then getting what we said was clearing away his own tier of, 4th best receiver. It was a great move for a need that they had after losing Calvin Ridley, and it kind of helps feel a little better knowing that you have Gabe Davis for $13 million annually, Christian Kirk for $20 million annually,
Right.
it makes you feel a little better when you got somebody like Brian Thomas.
Well, and also, I mean, I think they might have moved back and thought they were going to get Quinny Mitchell. And if they would have gone Quinny Mitchell here, would have loved it too. He just happens to go one spot before this,
right?
And so they're like, well, let's pivot and let's go with a receiver who we are comfortable. We'll make that receiver room. He's like the final piece they needed for everybody to be like, okay, we like Trevor Lawrence this year. We like kind of what they're doing. They have so many different kinds of players in that receiver room now, and then you got tight end Evan Ingram. So it just makes a lot of sense for what they did, just to like kind of put all the pieces together after overpaying Gabe Davis.
Mm-hmm. And then one of my, I guess, incorrect calls, that was like a bold prediction of, I just can't see Brian Thomas falling out of the top 15.
Mm-hmm.
I said that with acknowledgement of somebody still has to go get him.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we had him going to Denver or the Raiders. Like, whoever was at 11 was not going to need a receiver, whether that be, or was not going to select one. Everybody would have thought, if the Chargers moved back, oh, they should go receiver. No, they were going to go right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what would have happened. Denver has a receiving need, but that was never going to, it was going to be, I'm going quarterback, I'm going to trade back, or I'm going to get the best available defensive player.
Right.
Raiders did not need a receiver. New Orleans was not going to take a receiver.
Need a tackle.
Really, only Indy in the top, like between 11 and 18, truly needed one. And we had Brian Thomas getting traded up from Cincinnati with the premise that T. Higgins was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, T. Higgins is still there, so they didn't make that move. So he fell a little bit, and in addition to that, it sounds like he has a shoulder injury that he'll need surgery after the postseason. So it sounds like it's a significant injury enough to where it would be a multi-month absence.
Right.
So that's probably why he fell a little bit. But Jacksonville knocked it out of the park with this one, in my eyes.
I love this pick. We love the player, and we love the spot. The 23rd spot's definitely worth it. Jumping over to another one of our full drafts that we really liked. The Pittsburgh Steelers basically killed it. I mean, top to bottom, they got all the guys that they needed and got all the value that they needed. Round one, going offensive tackle, getting a left tackle. We had mocked them, Amarius Mims and different guys. Getting a left tackle in Troy Fatanu, who can also play guard. We're probably going to think with the Steelers he'll play tackle, though.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people wanted to put him as an interior offensive lineman. Well, at the Steelers, he's not to me. To me, he's got to play tackle for them. And then they do it again, and they go get, a guy in Zach Frazier, who at this point on most boards would have been gone. And add a center to their offensive line. It's just they were doing all the right things, it looked like, when they were drafting this time around. So
they were my favorite draft from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of others that feel the same way. But usually with draft classes, you get, ideally, in a good class, 3 starters,
Mm-hmm.
1 star, and then maybe a role player out of your 7 picks. To me, they got 5 starters in their first 5 picks this year. That's how impressive it was. And 3 of them are on the offensive line, which is huge because the last couple of years we've noted how, their offensive line kind of aged out after the Big Ben era,
right.
AB, Le'Veon Bell, that era, David DeCastro and all those guys, finally left, and they just needed to replace them. And so last year, Broderick Jones was the first round pick. And then this year, you could potentially have, if you have 2 starters in a 5 offensive linemen, that start, if you can get 2 longtime starters in one draft, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
They could have 3.
Yeah.
I mean, Mason McCormick is a guy that we haven't really talked about much, but he fell to them in the 4th round, and just as a guard.
Yeah, he's solid. He's out of South Dakota State with, he's FCS. So, we don't really get as many of those guys going to the combine and things like that. Well, he killed the combine. He's one of the most athletic, true athletes at the guard position. That's one of the things that we kind of overlook at times, is like when you have a offense set up to run the ball, because now you got Arthur Smith there, you have 2 running backs, they're going to run the ball. That's what they want to do. And now you go get some athletes to play, up front. Well, Fatanu, great athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Frazier, really pretty good athlete, and then you get Mason McCormick, who's a really good athlete, just not necessarily the biggest. Outside zone is sounding really good right now, because if everybody can move and they can all get up to the linebackers and they can all go second level, it's time to run the ball. Pat Freiermuth, pretty good blocker also, so it's definitely shaped up as like one of those teams that you're like, oh, okay, I can see what we're doing here.
Yeah, and then kind of touching on the third round picks that they had, Peyton Wilson, of our top 50 big board, he fell the lowest out of anybody,
except TJ Tampa. TJ Tampa was the only other one. Yeah.
What I meant to emphasize is he was our last number one.
Right. Yeah.
At his position, he fell the furthest.
Yeah.
And it was obviously because of the medical. He doesn't have an ACL in his knee, and there's not much of a track record of having success to that. But he is just a do-it-all, super uber athletic linebacker that is a first-round talent that is just aged out to drop in addition to his injury history.
Yeah.
But he's healthy. And now you're telling me next to Patrick Queen, a former first-round pick that you stole from Baltimore?
I will say the Peyton Wilson pick, every time a team got up, I was like, it's Peyton Wilson. Every time a team got up, I was like, Peyton Wilson's going right here. And he kept going, man. It was crazy because we like him so much. I mean, he had a 4.5 missed tackle rate, which is just insane. He's a really good in coverage. He's really great in coverage. And if you look at him, he's 6'4", I believe. He's huge. He can play tight ends. He can play running backs out of the backfield. And they had him edge rush at times at NC State, and he can do that too. So you're getting an all-around backer that doesn't have to play in the box and can basically be a very comfortable chess piece. And he's already 24. I know that's normally a bad thing, but in this case, when you get him in the third round, at the end of the third round, basically the fourth round, and he's such a good athlete, and he's so much older, he's ready to play at a high level right now. He's one of the guys that, you said starters. Well, he could end up being a star early in his career just for that reason. Like, he's ready to go right now.
Yeah. So. Once again, he is a more athletic version of Leighton Vander Esch.
Yes.
Same profile of injury concern, and they got him 2.5 rounds later. Yeah. Just incredible. And then Roman Wilson, obviously he wasn't in our top 10, but Pittsburgh has been one of the best at selecting mid-round receivers. So I'm going to give you, it's like the Tyler Guyton pick with Dallas. We don't love it, but you have such a good track record of picking linemen. It's like, okay, listen, we'll believe you. Yeah. We'll believe you.
Exactly.
Similar to Pittsburgh, like Roman Wilson, there's probably, if they were, we just talked about Troy Franklin. If they picked Troy Franklin in the third round, we would have felt probably a little better about it. But again, it's like Roman Wilson, you're going to transition into a ground and pound offense, and you just need a compliment to George Pickens at this point. Roman Wilson, just a guy that didn't put up numbers, but he was the go-to in big moments.
He fits this offense because he's already been in this offense, if that makes sense. He literally comes from Michigan where they're run heavy and basically gets the ball when he needs to, maybe 4 catches a game. That's what he's going to get here. And he's just, if he's productive with those catches like we expect him to be, because he's a really good athlete. I mean, he can move really well. He runs pretty good routes. The biggest thing is like, he will be opposite George Pickens. He will be the number 2, but he's not going to be doing that much. He will be doing a lot of blocking. George Pickens better get ready to block too. I know he doesn't like it. He can get over it because it's time to.
He's probably going to have the most productive 400 to 500 yards this year.
Yeah.
Out of anybody. That's probably a realistic expectation based on the offense. They'll probably be one of the fewest like passing oriented teams. But the way he blocks, the way he just is a good football player, that's the way he's going to contribute. And like, don't look at, because this is a deep receiver class, if he doesn't come close to 1,000 yards, like 4 to 5 will. Like, don't view him as, it's a
bust for some reason. It's not a bust in this situation and in this offense. And like I said, he's done it before. New quarterbacks there. They're going to be moving. He's really good at getting open late into the in 6 seconds. So I think
I kind of view him a little bit to Tyler Boyd.
Yeah.
It's just like if he's your wide receiver 3, like I feel really good about my offense. And obviously Pittsburgh, he probably has to play more than you would ideally want him to early on. But again, similar thing of just you don't need the 1,000 yards from him to have a productive and successful football player.
Right, absolutely. But that's our final favorite, our winners from this draft class. I think we tried to cover a little bit of everything, and this is a great way to finish it off. I mean, it's a team that basically rebuilt their offensive line in one draft class. It's just crazy to look at, and then they got great value in other places. So
they're going to be much higher in our power rankings than you probably think, and others think.
Yeah,
and I think it's validated.
Yeah, I think that their defense is ready already, and then their offense has just gotten a lot better. And Arthur Smith has a track record of winning. He knows how to win, and even if
he frustrates the hell out of you as a fantasy player, but when you're trying to win football games, like he can do that.
Yeah, get ready to pick the Steelers defense, but everybody else, I think, is kind of going to fall a little bit more than you think, based on him just being there. But yeah, we really appreciate y'all being with us, and go like, comment, subscribe on this video. Tell us who y'all thought y'all's biggest winners were during this class, because there's obviously 257 picks and we can't get them all right. So, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we appreciate you guys sticking with us. Please like, comment, subscribe. Check out our other reactions to the draft over this past week. We'll be coming out with much more content with that. And then now, as we get into the true off season of football, where there's not a lot of news and downtime, other than the schedule reaction that'll come out May 9th, or the schedule comes out May 9th, we'll react to it, and that'll come out in a couple days after that. Other than that, there's not a ton of news that we'll be reacting to. It's just going to be getting into best ball. We'll introduce it to those that aren't familiar, and then other things. Obviously, fantasy, we play DFS a lot. Prize Pick / underdog, prop betting, all that stuff. We've done fairly well. The two of us, in the way we do things across multiple sports, but obviously this is a football podcast, so we're going to do our best to just kind of break it down and introduce it to y'all so that we can all profit and have fun watching football like we always do.
All together, So we really appreciate it, and y'all have a good one. We'll see y'all next time.